What is going on, Pacer Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice Pacers. Your guys, Derek and Cody, with you as always. And guys, we want to talk about whether or not the Pacers should be looking to give Pascal Siakam a max contract. Obviously, it seems like a fairly straightforward question. We kind of want to dive into it, just kind of see what we're dealing with here. So, Cody, let's go ahead and hop into this real quick. I'll run some of these numbers down for you. So, in order for a player to get a max contract, first time you would normally get a max contract is you would get 25% of the team's estimated salary cap. Now, if you're, I think it's 7 to 9 years in the league, then it jumps up to like 30%. And then if you're above 10 plus years, then you can get 35%. So, you know, a player like Steph Curry or LeBron James or Kevin Durant, those guys would get a super max contract because they've been in the league for 10 freaking years. So that would be one of those situations where they would get 35%. Now, with Pascal Siakam, I believe Siakam, this will now be his 8th season in the NBA, 8th or 9th, I can't remember, but he would be getting 30% if he were to get a max contract. Now, I'll run through the numbers here for you, and then we'll kind of hop into the conversation. So the tax threshold this year for the NBA is just over $171 million. Now, for anyone that doesn't know what that is exactly, the salary cap, the NBA does have a salary cap, but it's a soft salary cap. So not every team has the same amount, but there is basically a limit to where you can go. And if you exceed it, then you get hit with a tax, which basically means if that team goes over that amount of money, then their owners have to fork up so many $1 million for going over the tax threshold. So it would basically be like if the NFL went over their budget on their salary caps, then their NFL owners would just have to pay the difference and whatever it is that's going on there. So for end of story short. So it's sitting just over 171 million, and the Indiana Pacers, with everyone that's on their roster currently, Cody, for next year, is sitting at just under $115 million. So about 50, you'd have about $56 million to mess with this next season, barring if you change any numbers around or if, you know, there's a few incentives that you could potentially. Now, that's just to the tax threshold. So 56 million to escape hitting the tax threshold number. I did the math on it, and if Pascal Siakam were getting 30%, then ultimately what he would be receiving is, I think it's about 40, it's just around 43 million, I believe. Okay. So that would be the number most likely that Pascal Siakam would get this offseason. Just in comparison, last year did make around 38 million as a player last year. And that would make him tied with Tyrese Halliburton for the most on the team this next year. And then I think that number goes up more because salary cap usually increases. So that counts into an inflation and whatnot of that. So what do you think of that? $43 million for Pascal Siakam, most likely a max contract. What's your thoughts on him getting a max? Does he deserve it? Do you think the Pacers should immediately be jumping on it? Does that concern you with the Pacers' ability to move anything around on their roster?
I think for me, and first off, I was just looking on Sports Illustrated, just kind of looking at what that number would be. And I don't know how accurate this is, but according to Bobby Marks of ESPN, he says he's eligible for a 5-year, $245 million deal, which would be about $49 million per year. So I don't know what, 43, 49, but yeah,
I mean, like, I think it's somewhere in there. The numbers vary. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the actual number is because, like, it's somewhere
Yeah.
in the mid 40s, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would say between probably 45 and 50, somewhere within that range is probably pretty fair. So yeah, but when it comes to Pascal Siakam, just a little bit of backstory here, Derek, for what he did last year with the Pacers. Remember the Pacers traded for him January 18th, right? So and then Pascal Siakam came in, automatically filled that power forward position and played very, very well, and obviously helped lead the Pacers to the Eastern Conference Finals. And in those 17 games that he played in, Derek, Pascal Siakam averaged 21.6 points, 7.5 rebounds, 3.8 assists per game. So, I mean, was very obviously crucial to what the Pacers did. And even in the regular season, when Tyrese Halliburton was dealing with his injury, we saw Pascal Siakam kind of rise up. And even when, Halliburton was even on the court, Pascal Siakam, for a good chunk of the end of the season for the Pacers, was, I think we could say, their best player. Like, he was so good, so clutch, made so many incredible shots, and it was just, obviously we know he can dish the basketball as well, and just felt like he was so clutch when it came to certain mid-range shots that he could make. I mean, this dude was just automatic from there pretty much all season for the Pacers. And so I think definitely, Derek, when you think about, with Pascal Siakam, obviously the max, what kind of a commitment that is. But I mean, Derek, you look at it and you say, hey, Pascal Siakam fits in really well with this Pacers team. Obviously only coming in January, but definitely felt like he just fit so well into the Pacers locker room and what they were doing. And he loves Indiana. Obviously, we know him and Tyrese Halliburton have that connection. And I think their play style, more that up-tempo type of offense, they fit very well together from that standpoint. And Pascal Siakam wants to be here. I think that's the most important thing, Derek. And, we've heard from Shams and some other people that, Siakam wants to be here, and the Pacers, their top priority is bringing him back. So, I mean, when it comes to the max, I kind of look at it and say, when's the last time the Indiana Pacers have had a player like Pascal Siakam? Obviously, we know they have Tyrese, but like two potential superstar, all-star type players on their roster. Like, when's the last time the Pacers have had that? It's been a long time, right? It's been a while. And we know the difference from the Pacers from what we saw when Siakam came versus when he didn't. I mean, I felt like it took the Pacers, even though they were very inconsistent at times, I felt like it just took them to another level. And you just kind of wonder, Derek, like if Tyrese hadn't been hurt for all that time, how much better could the Pacers have been, with him fully healthy? So I think you want to bring him back. You want him, and you just for a cohesive standpoint from the locker room. I mean, we talked about in our last video about how young this Pacers team is. Pascal Siakam is one of the older players on this roster, and I think you need that combination of the young guys and also the veterans, right? The guys that have been there. And Pascal Siakam, we know what he obviously can do shooting the basketball and just as a player, but just think about what resume he has, right? He's been, to an NBA and won an NBA championship. So he's got that mindset. He's got that understanding of what it takes to get there, Derek. I think that's so valuable for your young team and what you want to do moving forward. And we talked about how, really helpful it was for this young Pacers team to get that playoff experience. But I think even so, Derek, it's helpful to have a guy that's not just been to the Eastern Conference Finals or just the before the finals, but actually has been to the finals and won the finals, right? I think that's so important to have just somebody like that who understands what it takes to win a championship. So I think from a player standpoint, Pascal Siakam fits in really well. He's a very good player for the Pacers. And, you talked about how efficient he was this year and less minutes than he's had in the last couple of years. So I think for all those standpoints and everything like that, and also just the fact that he wants to be an Indiana Pacer, I think for me, I'm willing to make that deal. I'm willing to go and say, all right, here you go, Pascal. You have earned it because you were literally our team when our team was trying to figure out who we were. You were literally our offense. You were our steady force, right? I kind of think like Pascal Siakam in certain ways, Derek, is like the rock of that team, like the glue almost that it felt like it was holding that team together, especially in the playoffs, when they kind of were, had times where they honestly could have folded earlier on in the playoffs. But how helpful is that to have a player like Pascal Siakam that can help you, weather the storm, weather the games, the good and the bad, right? So I think that's just so valuable going forward, especially for this young team, to have a player, a veteran like that, who still can play at a very high level.
I think that it is extremely valuable for the team to be able to keep their second best scorer, sometimes even their best scorer at times. So, for Pascal Siakam, like you said, he's practically he's one of the oldest guys on the roster. He's pretty much the second oldest guy that gets any kind of actual minutes when it comes to overall production wise. And I think from the 49 number that you gave me, I think if you were to give him the max contract, on average, that's what he would be making in a year. Because if you look at the contract that Tyrese Halliburton's numbers were, it goes up every year that he plays. So this next year, Tyrese Halliburton is going to make 42.3 million. And then the next it's going to be 46. Then it's going to be 49. Then it's going to be 52 and a half. Then it's going to be 56. So it goes up by a certain number, basically almost $3.5 million every single year at that point. So, I think that that's probably how they would structure that deal for Siakam. Probably give him about the same number as what you give Halliburton. And then if that's what you would give him, and then for this year, you would still be left with about $15 million before you would hit that threshold number. And that's a lot of good situations for you because, like I said, Halliburton is locked down for the future. So is Naismith. So is Walker. So is Shepard, Nembhard. Miles Turner is locked down at least for the next year. Miles Turner is 100% going to get another contract with the Pacers. He's not going to get a max, but he's definitely going to get a good amount of money from them. So, and you got Benedict Mathurin locked down for at least until the end of 2026. So, I mean, that you got most of your guys in foundation here, but you need to keep the second best player on your team in this building because, like you said, he was an insurance policy when the team really needed a scorer and someone that knew how to carry a team when that was needed. And then as well as when the team is at full swing, the guy wanted to be here, Cody. I mean, he talked about it so much. Like, he has a lot of respect for the organization. He loves the players that he's playing with. And he averaged 21, 7, and 4 and shot 50% from the floor. Like, I don't know what more we're talking about here. Like, he's one of the, outside of LeBron James and maybe one or two other people, there's no one else in free agency that is more desirable of a player right now than Pascal Siakam, who is still in his prime, maybe the most fluid player on your team when it comes to actual ball. So it just makes all the sense in the world to me that you would keep Siakam, get him that max contract, and then if you want to play around with some numbers with Obi Toppin, you have enough to sign him to a multi-year deal if you wanted to keep him around, or if you wanted to test your waters with some free agency stuff, so you have other options. Like, the most of your team is going to remain the same for next year. Really, the only person that you have to make any kind of adjustment potentially to is Obi Toppin. Obi Toppin's really the only one that you have to wonder, is he going to remain a Pacer going into this next year? Other than that, if you have Siakam, this is going to be the same exact Pacers team as it was this last year. Just this time, you're going to keep Siakam around for a while. So for me, it just seems like a no-brainer. You have the room to do it. You're going to stay under the threshold, and you still have that flexibility.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right. And I think that's important to keep this team around because we talked about it before, Derek. Like, this team, let's be honest, like the guys that started the season versus the guys that ended, in the playoffs, like almost like a completely different team in a lot of ways, right? I mean, there's a couple guys that stayed the same, but I mean, look at it, Derek. Like, from the beginning of the 2023 season, you didn't have, obviously Pascal Siakam. You didn't really have Andrew Nembhard in the role he was, right? And there was a lot of kind of unknowns with this Pacers team, right? And now I feel like you have a little bit more of like we kind of have an idea who our starters are going to be and who are some of our role players are going to be. Like, I feel like your roster is so much more defined at this point than it was to start the season, right? And if you keep Pascal Siakam around, like, how helpful is that going to be to actually have like a full off season, to have, training camp, to have just all these things playing with these guys and just continuing to develop that chemistry, right? Because you didn't really have a lot of time, if you're Pascal Siakam, to develop chemistry with these guys. You really didn't. You kind of just got thrown in there in mid-January, and you kind of figure it out on the fly. And the Pacers were figuring it out on the fly because we obviously know they had, the trade of Buddy Hield. Benedict Mathurin goes out for the season. And so they're having to dig deep into their, depth on their roster to really figure it out, Derek. So I think it would just be so valuable for this team and for the core of this team to have that full offseason together, as, kind of knowing who are some of those guys that are entrenched in there a little bit more and who are some of the other role guys. So I think for Pascal Siakam and for this Pacers team, that would be so valuable to have that chemistry for an entire offseason leading in to the 2024 season.
Absolutely. Well, Pacer Nation, let us know. What do you think? Should the Pacers be giving Pascal Siakam a max contract? Should there be some other things that they may try to do? But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Let us know your thoughts on it. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Pacers.